Summer of the Mariposas by Guadalupe Garcia McCall, read by Melinda Garcia. Chapter 10. La garza. Parada en una patita, la garza mira y admira a mis gemelitas. The heron. Standing on one leg, the heron watches and marvels at my twins. By the time we arrived at Teresita's house, towing the bleeding goat by a mecate, an old rope, tied in a sailor's knot around its neck, the sun was completely out. I figured it was 8 or 9 in the morning. Already the heat blazed down on us with a vengeance, and we were so dehydrated our tongues felt like thick, dry parchments in our mouths. We didn't have to call out. An old man with a sun weathered straw hat and faded overalls unbent himself from his chores in the garden to nod our way as we walked up to him. We couldn't talk. We were so winded and fatigued from the long trek. Seeing our state, the old man walked over to a well, unhooked a tin pail, and dropped it carefully down into the water. You look dried out, he said, as he pulled the pail back up by a cord attached to the handle. Come have some water. This is the best well in all of Mexico. It's so cold and fresh, it could wake up the dead. For a moment, I was wary of the old man and didn't take the cup of fresh water. Instead, I looked down the well and saw nothing but the dark river water flowing freely, appetizingly, on its way to some unknown destination. With my sister standing a few feet away from us, looking scared but hopeful, I took the cup of water and sniffed it. It smelled like nothing and everything. It smelled like the freshness of spring and all the joy that it could bring. It smelled like a promise. Gingerly, I tasted it, letting the coolness of the water sit on my tongue while I decided if it was okay to let the girls have some. It tasted better than it smelled. It tasted like summer, like fun, like innocence in the Rio Grande. So I swallowed, and the purity of it was divine. We drank greedily from the pail, not bothering to talk or even look up at the old man, who seemed to be enjoying the scenery while he waited for us to get our fill. That will do you, he said, dumping out the rest of the water into the cement trough attached to the well. The splash scared off a scorpion who had been sunning himself in the morning light. We're the Garza girls. We're here to see Teresita, I said, as I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. Is this her place? What took you so long? He asked, waving to the front door of the shack. Come in, she's been waiting for you for ages. Teresita was not who we expected. For starters, she didn't look like a woman. She looked like an old man dressed up like an old woman. There was just nothing feminine about her. Her floral print cotton dress hung on her rail thin body like a discarded flour sack. She looked like a praying mantis, bent over, sitting at her table, rubbing her hands together. When she waved us in, we saw that her hands were big and bony with huge knuckles. The tips of her fingers were blunt, squared off, and tapered like those of a working man. Her nose, too, was unusually masculine. It was big and swollen and riddled with crevices and white, scarred blemishes. It hung like a bulbous mushroom in front of her face. But that wasn't the worst of it. No, the worst of it was her small, naked head. Except for a few gray strands of hair, she was as bald as a baby pigeon, which gave her the appearance of being a very old man with enormous wide eyes. The only feminine thing about her was the huge pair of silver earrings which hung so low on her thin, elongated earlobes they touched her shoulders. Come here. Let me look at you closely. My eyes are not as good as they used to be, thanks to these miserable cataracts. Teresita said, her skeletal fingers waving us in, urging us closer. As we neared the table, we saw what she meant. Her pupils were clouded over, opaque, and she seemed to not know exactly where we were standing in the room. Cecilia said, Juanita said, pulling the bleeding goat behind us. I know, Teresita said, a genuine smile lifting the sides of her thin, shriveled mouth. We brought you this cabrito for your services, I said. Sí, gracias, Teresita said, taking the goat and untying the knot at its throat. She picked it up, stroked it, kissed it, and then let it go. The goat ran off and made her way out the open door, bleating happily the whole way. Sit down, sit down. I sat down on the only other chair at her little table. Juanita scooted in beside me, and the rest of the girls huddled behind us. You want to know how to get to your abuelita's house? Teresita said, picking up an old deck of cards with unusual images on them. Loteria! Pita cried exultantly. Oh, goody, can I play? Not quite, Teresita said, waving the cards in front of us before shuffling them expertly in her manly hands. These cards are more ancient than your loteria, more powerful. They will help you reach your destination, the home of your ancestors. Our car broke down, I said, being careful not to divulge too much information. I know, she said, leaning forward and looking at the deck spread before her. You're going to have to travel by foot the rest of the way. She picked up a card and almost pressed her globular nose to it to look at it closely. Then she did the same with the 5 other cards before she straightened up and sighed. How much farther is it? I asked. It is a difficult road you've taken, one riddled with hardships and painful ordeals. But then again, you are difficult children. She smiled as she said it, pointing a crooked index finger at us. Unfortunately, the road ahead is full of trials and tribulations. You have angered the witch, and now you must pay for your transgressions. The doom of her words dragged me down, anchored me in our misery at the knowledge that I could have avoided what was coming. Pay? Yes, Teresita said, looking at me closely now. But then again, you knew that already, didn't you? Knew what? Juanita asked, turning back and forth between me and Teresita, waiting for the answers that we were both reluctant to disclose. Cecilia has called upon evil to plague you, Teresita proclaimed, putting her hands over 3 of the cards on the table before us. They are coming this way, the children of the night, traveling forth from the ancient world, coming from far and wide to avenge their mother. Cecilia has children? Velia asked, leaning down to look at the cards. But she said she didn't. Not children like you. Teresita turned the 3 cards on the table upside down and leaned over to get a better look at them. Adopted children, immortal children, crafted by the devil himself and loosed upon this earth to aid in its destruction. Cecilia is a crafty, skillful sorceress. She has survived through the ages by cultivating that which lives and breathes in the darkest parts of our fearful minds. In her greed, her need for power, she has cultivated 3 of our greatest nightmares, nurturing their dark souls and sustaining their evil spirits by feeding them only malevolence and sin. In a way, she is more their mother than their own creators, and that is the problem. Your arrogance and conceit has called upon her wrath, and now you must face that which she has beset upon you, the evil trinity. Velia put her hand on my shoulder to get my attention. And you knew about this? Why didn't you warn us? Delia demanded. Petrified in my seat by Teresita's horrible prediction, I could only blink away my fearful tears. I didn't know she was real, I finally admitted. I met La Llorona at the river. She warned me about this, but I was too skeptical to believe her. Wait a minute. La Llorona is real? Juanita asked. Yes, but she's not evil. She's actually trying to help us, I continued. I tried telling you about it, but you didn't believe me. So I dismissed her warnings. Until this morning, when you started taunting Cecilia and I heard her curse us. I'm sorry. It's my fault. I should have told you everything from the start. I want to go home, Vita cried, reaching for Juanita, who took her in her arms and kissed her forehead like Mama soothes us. You can't run away from this, Teresita said, touching the cards and looking at the ceiling blindly. This time, you have to face your nightmares. Teresita was right. If only I'd warned my sisters of La Llorona's caution to be humble and good, we wouldn't be in this mess. Now it was up to me to contend with whatever evil I had brought upon us. I had to protect my hermanitas. Isn't there anything we can do to stop them? La Llorona gave me this amulet, these earrings. She said I could use it 5 times, once for each circle on its orbit. But I've already used it 3 times. What Cecilia has beset upon you is just the beginning. You must save the ear pendants' remaining gifts. Use them sensibly, for there is so much more to life than nightmares and demons in the dark. In order to go home, to be truly happy again, you must face the worst enemy of all, the monster that lives among you. But you'll need your magical gift to get there. So save your good fortune. Use it wisely. Can't you help us? I peered across the table, trying to get a better look at what was coming after us. I can't stop them, Teresita said. It's not within my power. All I can do is perceive and forewarn. But there are other ways I can help you. I can see into your future and advise you, caution you, tell you how to defeat that which dwells in the mystical realm. Those are things I am familiar with, things within my sight. Teresita went back to looking closely at the cards. I waited anxiously, signaling to my sisters to be quiet as she pondered. She pointed to a card, El Nagual. Then she rested her fingertips on 2 other cards sitting close together on the table. Lechuzas, lots of them. Witch owls? Juanita cried out. Where? When? El Nagual? I asked. What's that? Un brujo, a devious warlock. You will meet him first, but he will not show himself as who he really is. He will come in disguise, asking for help. But don't be deceived by his helplessness. He is wily and ruthless. At first, you won't know it is him, but once you discover his evil plot, you must sing and chant. Sing the song of the moon in the cave, the song of the birds in the rain, the song of your childhood. It will invoke the mother, and he will be much afraid. But we don't know the song of the cave, I said, looking around at my sisters for confirmation of our ignorance. Their faces were as confused as I'm sure mine looked. The lechuzas will be more difficult to escape, she continued. They are evil beyond compare. Their tongues are made of the fifth element, and their words are sharp, metal talents that can cut through even the cleverest of men. To avert the paralyzing effect of their punishment, you must pray 7 Padre Nuestros and 7 Ave Marias while you tie 7 perfectly spaced knots on a silk thread. Only then will you be able to escape the flame in their eyes. Flame in their eyes? Are you kidding? Juanita asked. The tone of her voice told me she'd had enough of Teresita's riddles. I had already met La Llorona and listened to her cryptic message, so my own dismay was not as great as that of my sisters. Juanita, please, I whispered, pinching her arm under the table. Well, what does she mean by that? She asked, rubbing her arm absently. I mean, what kind of advice is this? Cave songs and knots on stupid strings? Don't be rude. Juanita's lack of respect to the elderly Teresita embarrassed me. Teresita was only trying to help us get out of the mess unscathed, I thought. Of course, given our experiences with Cecilia, I wasn't sure I could believe everything Teresita had to say. So I kept my ears and my eyes open for suspicious behavior from the old soothsayer. Even if Cecilia had been under a spell and forced to tell the truth, I couldn't help but worry about my sisters. But if she was telling the truth, she was giving us answers we needed to pay attention to, even if we didn't understand them right now. No, it's all right, Teresita said. It is this girl's fire that will keep you safe as you face the last of the malevolent trinity, the wrenched chupacabras. El chupacabras? Pita wailed, terrified. There's no such thing. I'm out of here, Juanita exclaimed, jumping out of the chair and heading for the gaping door. Believe me, child, Teresita's husband said. stepping out of the darkness that suddenly seemed to overcast the room. He stood in the front of the door, impeding Juanita's progress. The chupacabras is very real. I saw it with my own two eyes, and I don't have cataracts. The twins had started for the door too, but, like Juanita, they stopped to listen to Teresita's husband. Where? Delia asked, crossing her arms in front of her chest. When? Belia demanded, mimicking her sister. A few months ago, out there at the base of the cerro. It was sucking the life out of one of my goats. It hissed at me when I came upon it. Its prickly coarse hair stood up like a sharp razor along the length of its back. It snarled and flew at me, the scrawny little thing. But I wasn't scared. I picked up my rifle and shot at it. You killed it? Pita asked, sounding relieved. No, Teresita's husband said, looking a little chagrined, yet firm at the same time. But I injured it. Shot it through its left eye. Bullet went right into its head. It howled like a rabid dog. I'd never seen anything like it before or since. That's the good news, Teresita said, leaning in to grip my hand with her claw like fingers. It's been injured by human hands, so it will be wary. But don't be fooled by its meekness. Its heart is pure evil. There is no humanity left in him. But how? I started, feeling completely overwhelmed by everything Teresita had said. Questions ran through my head. How would we recognize El Nagual? Juanita had a point. What was the song of the cave? It felt as if Teresita had given us more questions than answers. Don't show the chupacabras any mercy, Teresita's husband advised. Take the nearest tree branch and pound its head in. But what if? Pita started to speak, but fear devoured her voice and she didn't finish her sentence. It won't, Teresita assured us. It is all in the spread of the cards. You can save yourselves, but only if you are brave and cunning and stick together through these nightmares. You must never falter in your faith. It is the only way you will make it alive to your mama's house. You were never meant to die on the way. There are too many demons yet to be faced, too many tears yet to be shed. I wasn't sure I heard Teresita right. Was she trying to tell us that there were more demons waiting at home? If that was so, our journey was going to be longer and more worrisome than I'd been led to believe.